What if saving a neighborhood's soul meant displacing the very people who gave it life? Welcome to one of urban planning's most complex success stories, where preservation and gentrification danced a delicate waltz through the cobblestone streets of Salvador, Brazil. Nestled in the heart of Salvador, the capital of Bahia state, lies Pelourinho, a neighborhood whose name literally means whipping post in Portuguese. This World Heritage Site represents the largest collection of colonial architecture in Latin America. But its restoration story reveals the intricate challenges of balancing cultural preservation with social justice. Before the 1990s, Pelourinho was a paradox wrapped in crumbling baroque facades. The neighborhood that once served as Brazil's first capital had become synonymous with urban decay, poverty, and social problems. Drug trafficking flourished among the ruins of 17th century churches, while families lived in buildings that seemed to defy gravity with their deteriorating walls and collapsing roofs. Yet beneath this surface of neglect lay something extraordinary. Pelourinho had become the beating heart of Afro-Brazilian culture in Salvador. Capoeira circles formed spontaneously in its squares, while the rhythms of samba de roda echoed through narrow streets. The neighborhood housed countless terreiros, sacred spaces for Candomblé religious practices brought by enslaved Africans centuries earlier. The transformation began in 1992 when the Bahian government launched an ambitious restoration project. The scale was breathtaking. Over 1,500 buildings spanning 30 hectares would undergo complete renovation. The project aimed to restore not just the physical structures, but to revitalize the entire cultural ecosystem of the neighborhood. Walking through today's Pelourinho feels like stepping into a living museum painted in tropical hues. Pastel yellow, coral pink, and turquoise blue facades create a rainbow of colonial elegance. The Igreja do Rosário dos Pretos, built by and for enslaved people, stands as a testament to resilience. Its simple exterior concealing ornate gold-leafed interiors that rival any European cathedral. The restoration team faced extraordinary challenges. Many buildings were literally held up by neighboring structures, requiring innovative engineering solutions. Craftsmen had to relearn forgotten techniques, mixing traditional lime mortars and recreating intricate wooden balconies using centuries-old methods. The project became a masterclass in heritage conservation, establishing protocols that would influence restoration projects across Latin America. But the real controversy emerged around the human element. The restoration required relocating approximately 1,500 families who had called Pelourinho home for generations. These weren't just residents. They were the cultural guardians whose daily lives had kept Afro-Brazilian traditions alive in the neighborhood's streets and courtyards. The government promised adequate housing and financial compensation. But critics argued that relocating these families severed the authentic cultural connections that made Pelourinho special. How do you preserve a neighborhood's cultural soul when you remove the people who embody that culture? The economic transformation was undeniable. Tourism revenue skyrocketed from virtually nothing to millions of dollars annually. International recognition followed, with Pelourinho becoming a symbol of successful urban renewal. The neighborhood attracted restaurants, hotels, cultural centers, and artisan workshops, creating thousands of jobs in a region desperate for economic opportunity. However, this success came with unintended consequences. The restored Pelourinho initially felt sanitized, lacking the organic vibrancy that had characterized it before renovation. Critics dubbed it a theme park, arguing that the government had prioritized tourist appeal over authentic cultural preservation. The project's architects recognized these concerns and adapted their approach. They began actively recruiting Afro-Brazilian cultural practitioners to return to the neighborhood. The Casa do Benin was established to celebrate African heritage, while the Museu da Cidade showcased Salvador's complex cultural history. Cultural centers offered free classes in capoeira, percussion, and traditional crafts. Today's Pelourinho represents a fascinating hybrid. During daylight hours, it bustles with tourists exploring its museums, churches, and cultural attractions. The Fundação Casa de Jorge Amado celebrates Brazil's beloved writer, who immortalized Bahian culture in his novels. The Museu Abelardo Rodrigues houses one of Latin America's finest collections of sacred art. But as evening approaches, a different Pelourinho emerges. Local musicians gather in the Terreiro de Jesus Square, their drums creating rhythms that seem to emanate from the very stones beneath their feet. Capoeira masters lead impromptu performances, their movements telling stories of resistance and resilience passed down through generations. The neighborhood's restaurants showcase Bahian cuisine at its finest. Acarajé vendors prepare these traditional bean fritters with dendere palm oil, their recipes unchanged since colonial times. The aroma of vatapá, a creamy shrimp and coconut dish, mingles with the sounds of berimbau musical bows, creating a sensory experience that's uniquely Bahian. The restoration's architectural achievements cannot be overstated. The Igreja e Convento de São Francisco, with its baroque facade and rococo interior, covered in gold leaf, represents one of Brazil's most important religious monuments. The restoration team spent years painstakingly cleaning centuries of grime from intricate carvings and frescoes, revealing artistic treasures that had been hidden for decades. The project's success attracted international attention, establishing Salvador as a model for heritage-led urban renewal. Cities across Latin America and beyond studied Pelourinho's restoration methods, adapting its techniques to their own historical neighborhoods. The project demonstrated that well-planned heritage conservation could drive economic development while preserving cultural identity. Yet, the social questions persist. Recent studies suggest that while the restoration succeeded in preserving buildings and attracting investment, it struggled to maintain the neighborhood's role as an affordable residential area for working-class Afro-Brazilian families. Property values soared, making it difficult for original residents to return even when they wanted to. The Pelourinho project evolved in response to these criticisms. Later phases emphasized mixed-use development, creating affordable housing units alongside tourist facilities. Cultural programs actively sought to maintain connections with displaced families, offering employment opportunities and cultural programming that honored their contributions to the neighborhood's heritage. Environmental considerations also played a role in the restoration's later phases. Solar panels were discreetly integrated into historic roof lines, while modern waste management systems were installed beneath colonial-era streets. These innovations demonstrated how historical preservation could embrace sustainability without compromising architectural integrity. The neighborhood's cultural calendar reflects this balance between preservation and evolution. The Festival de Inverno de Salvador transforms Pelourinho into an outdoor concert venue, featuring both traditional Afro-Brazilian music and contemporary artists. During Carnival, the neighborhood becomes one of Salvador's most important celebration spaces, with blocos Afro performing in the same squares where their ancestors once gathered. Statistics tell part of the story. The restoration directly employed over 8,000 workers during its peak phases, while tourism to Salvador increased by 400% in the decade following the project's completion. Property values in Pelourinho increased by over 300%, demonstrating the restoration's economic impact. But numbers cannot capture the intangible elements that make Pelourinho special. The way afternoon light filters through colonial balconies, casting intricate shadows on cobblestone streets. The sound of children learning Capoeira songs in cultural centers that occupy restored colonial mansions. The sight of elderly Candomblé practitioners blessing the same doorways their grandparents once blessed. The Pelourinho restoration ultimately became both a model and a cautionary tale. It proved that ambitious heritage conservation could revitalize neglected urban areas while preserving irreplaceable cultural treasures. It demonstrated the economic potential of cultural tourism and established conservation techniques that influenced projects worldwide. Yet, it also highlighted the complex relationship between preservation and gentrification, raising questions that urban planners continue to grapple with today. How do you save a neighborhood's buildings without displacing its soul? How do you balance economic development with social equity? How do you preserve culture while allowing it to evolve? These questions don't have simple answers. But Pelourinho's ongoing evolution suggests that successful urban renewal requires constant adaptation and community engagement. The neighborhood story reminds us that preserving our urban heritage means more than saving buildings. It means nurturing the communities and cultures that give those buildings meaning. In a world where rapid development often erases historical neighborhoods overnight, Pelourinho stands as proof that with careful planning, adequate resources, and genuine commitment to cultural preservation, we can save both our architectural treasures and the communities that call them home.